most people listening who are not into topics like this are like, I'm not going to be on a rocket. I'm not going to be on Mars. I don't care about that. I'm here on Earth, right? What if a car hits me and I lose a leg or a kidney or something like that, you know? And we mentioned before the podcast that there is one technology related to 3D printing that can also answer something like that. 3D printed organs are, you know, something that some people say it's impossible, but tell us a little, educate us, Brendan.
Well, it's sort of, I mean, it's pretty much exactly the same problem as 3D printing meat, because that's literally what it is. You're printing meat with a purpose aside from sustenance.
And eating it,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, so sustaining yourself by eating it. But yeah, so it's I wish I was more up on this, to be honest with you. Have you heard of any successful organ printing studies? Yeah.
I've seen videos where they're trying to print out a human heart, but I don't think they managed to print it out fully just out of meat. I think they're
I've seen the one you're
it.
talking about, and they like run electrical impulses through it, and it starts twitching on the petri dish. Yeah,
and I've seen one where they still have metal parts inside, or it's plastic or some. It's not biomass. It's help me out here.
A scaffold.
Yes, and it's kind of holding it in place or replacing parts that they still can't get to work. So as far as my, you know, like not that intensive research has found out, is that we're still not there. But
no, we're not.
But people are working on it, and it's a technology that's coming. And
talking about the scaffold as well makes me think of, like, we discussed it during the printing meat discussion, but it's, again, like, it's literally the same thing. It's the same problem, because when you're printing meat, if you want to achieve as much authenticity as you possibly can, then you want to grow the meat in the same way that it would have grown inside an animal. And one of the issues with that is that, as anybody who has watched a baby grow up into a child will be able to see, there are parts of the animal or parts of a living creature. You don't want to think of humans as animals, but spoiler, we are animals.
To a certain degree.
We're animals. There are parts of any animal or living creature that sort of expand and unfurl and grow. It's hard to describe.
Just like a tree out of an acorn.
Yeah, in a sense, but I'm thinking more specific. Like, if you think about a baby's ear, and then think about that person's ear 15 years later, it will have expanded and changed shape and all of that. But that's still the same ear. It's still the same tissue. There's been cells added to it. But what I'm getting at is that there are structures within the body, typically made of cartilage, that will be formed at birth, or at conception, I suppose, formed during gestation. There we go. That are, and I'm skirting around the word designed, because it's not a design, it's an evolutionary design, if you will, that have evolved to unfurl in a particular way that is advantageous. And all of that kind of came together by accident. It was an accidental advantage in evolutionary terms. But the point of it is that those changes and unfurling of the support structures around the meat apply different stresses and compressions and thermal loads and all sorts of different environmental cues onto the actual cellular structure of that meat. And those are what give us differences in texture between, you know, back bacon and pork belly, for example. But it also is what gives you the difference between a heart muscle and a tongue, you know?
Yeah.
So you've got, I mean, there's also genetic information that gives those differences. And those we can account for as well with choosing what we biopsy and culturing stem cells into different expressions of the genes that they contain. So it's very complex. But the point that I'm getting to is that there have been computer programs developed now that have been able to reverse engineer, for example, the ear growth formula. And so it can instruct a 3D printer to print in this, and I've seen that they have printed cartilage. So that's one of the stepping stones to getting this kind of authentic feeling meat that has lived, in a sense, the life that it needs to, without actually being attached to a conscious being. That can print it out in this kind of crumpled form. And then as you supply nutrients and electrical impulses and all of the experiences of life to it, it will, by its very nature, unfurl and provide the stresses and the environmental cues that this particular part of the body needs to have to form correctly. And so that obviously applies to creating authentic meat, but authentic meat is another way of saying a realistic organ or a realistic body part.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting and really complex, but these are problems that are being worked on in tandem, and they're probably all going to flow together and create some really incredible stuff in the future.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see the full version, go to the Uncle Gold Podcast YouTube channel or watch the next clip.